Hello, hello. Welcome back. Thanks for staying or coming back. Joining us now is Daniel Olson. He hails from Philadelphia, and he is the COO of Digital Cube, which focuses on building SaaS products with WordPress, hosted on AWS. We are very happy to have him here, and I will let him take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Dan. Is everyone having a good time at WordCamp for Publishers? All right. I will say it is one of the most well-designed WordCamps I've ever been to. So congratulations, whoever designed the logo. It's great. As Libby said, my name's Daniel Olson. I'm COO at Digital Cube. So Digital Cube makes WordPress SaaS products on AWS. So we started as a team of AWS engineers and WordPress developers. So we find ways to kind of merge those services. So the platform of WordPress and open source brought to the scalability and robustness of Amazon. So my talk is called Alternative Hacks, WordPress Security from the Outside Looking In. And the idea behind this talk, and maybe want to do it, was throughout my career working with WordPress, I encounter a lot of problems, or I see a lot of talks where people discuss solutions and fixes, security fixes related to WordPress, but it's always jumping straight to a WordPress plugin. So I need to secure WordPress, throw a WordPress plugin in the mix. So it's not always a one, size fits all solution. And what I like to think is, all right, remove WordPress from the equation. How do you secure your site? There's really no difference from any other application or stack. So just take a step back and see what other solutions you can find to harden security on your application. So why care about security? It's just simple. Like, it's why would you actually care about this? Like, what's the value in that? And I think it's client responsibility. So whether you care about security or not, you're doing a job for a client often. So you need to have their back and watch out for them and make sure that your application or the site you're building is secure so that they don't lose money and you don't lose time. So user responsibility. So users, you can lose trust in a second, or you can take a career building your reputation of responsibility over a lifetime. Like Warren Buffett said that. But the idea is if you don't handle data respectively or responsibly and you make a mistake, you can lose your entire company. You could lose users. You can lose trust. And also personal responsibility. So if you do your job right and you make a habit out of that, then it affects the other people around you. So your clients will see that, your other coworkers will notice that, and you can kind of build a culture of progress. So ultimately, stuff happens. Oh, I didn't actually mean to write that word. So I'll skip. Sorry, stuff happens. That's what happens when you're in the hotel room making slides with Ancient Aliens on in the background. So old habits die hard. So what do? You just fix them. You just tighten up your bootstraps and find a way to get past it. Security is not a linear thing. It happens in a cycle. So you don't go from not secure to secure. It's not like a switch that you turn on. You can't say to someone, all right, add this WordPress plugin and you're secure. There's no really quick fix for it. So the approach I take to security is more of like a design problem. And my background is in design, so approaching a problem is looking at many sides. How will it fit in this situation? How does it work with this budget? You just have to find the right solution that fits for you. So the idea is approach security like a design problem and less of a technical problem. Because if you jump straight into the technical problem, you can fix something that might be working for this particular instance, but it might not actually fit into your workflow. And this idea comes from a site that I really enjoy reading. It's called Source Making. And Source Making takes the idea of programming and kind of the philosophy of how you should approach programming, but without the technical bloat. So it's approaching design problems or technical problems as design solutions. And it all centers around this idea of workflow. So workflow for me is it's your everyday task. So it's you build sites, you scale sites, you build servers. There's all those little pieces that happen in between. So each step is a part of your workflow. And if one thing doesn't work, then fix it. So find that weak link and get it out of your system, or get it out of your workflow, or improve it. So not always the quick fix is the solution. You got to lobby for the right fix. So if you're looking at your workflow and you're seeing, all right, this is how I upload sites, or this is how I deploy, and it kind of works, but it's a pain in the ass, pain in the butt, then what you can do is identify that as a problem and go back and lobby and fix it. If you can't always fix the problem, then compromise. Sometimes that's the solution, but you have to document. If you're trying to fix a big problem and it's like company-wide, then you can do that, but you just have to communicate with your coworkers, higher-ups, and lobby for the right fix. So that website source making approaches these design problems as two ideas. One is anti-patterns, and the anti-pattern is something that you do that doesn't really work, but it works, it's just not the best solution. So it's a commonly occurring solution to a problem that generates decidedly negative consequences. So, for example, FTP. So, all right, FTP works, but it's not the best solution. You can lose data files in transit, it can stop, files are large, it takes forever. So it is a solution sometimes, but it's not always the best solution. So what you would do is, on the adverse side of that, is find a design pattern. So design patterns are an approach to a solution to a commonly occurring problem that's repeatable, but it's not a finished design. So design patterns are approaches to solving problems. It's not the specific fix. So the specific fix is that quick fix. It's like, all right, this thing doesn't work, or this piece of code doesn't work. I'm just going to go in and do a hot fix. But if you were to approach it as a design pattern, you'd go in and say, why doesn't this code work? And you'd look at it and say, all right, well, this code doesn't work because of this other thing we did 10 steps earlier. Let's fix that. And then from here on out, we save ourselves some time and the headache of that issue. So the flow of this is look at your workflow, find out all the pieces that you handle, and then find what things are anti-patterns. So things that you do that are fixes and they work, but they're not really the right solution. So you have to go in and find the right one, which is be your design pattern. So the idea in my head, the way I see this, is workflow versioning. So it's release candidates for personal micro improvements, or you can think of it as treat yourself. So the more you improve your workflow, the happier you will be, the more time you'll have, the more secure your applications will be, the more your coworkers will like you, the more profitable your company will be. There's nothing bad about improving your workflow, and it gives you more time, which allows you to build more secure applications. So a few ideas of this in practice. I'm just going to pull out a few, which are not specifically technical, but they could apply to your company or your application. So one would be disaster plans. So disaster plans, they fit into a workflow in some point. So you might need them, you might never need them, but what happens if something bad does happen? So discuss them early and often. So if you don't have a disaster plan with your company or your product, then just bring it up. See what would happen if everything went wrong. So a couple ideas would be total data loss, client or customer data hack, or unexpected downtime. So just like pick out one of these and go through that scenario. What happens if you have total data loss? So that would be an anti-pattern. A few of these would be like, all right, I have no plan. That's one solution, or that's one thing, I guess, technically. Or you only have partial backups, or files only, no config. You have no SLA. So SLA would be your service level agreement with your clients or your company or your other third-party providers. So what happens if you have no plan? It's a simple one, get one. Let's say you only have partial backups. So back up efficiently, not aggressively. So this might be different for every company or situation, but just kind of identify that as a problem and think, all right, how do we solve that? What you can do is think of it like this. If your data is in one place, then it's in no place. Somebody said that. And I kind of go back on that whenever people think about disaster plans and recovery. So this policy that I personally have is the scorched the earth policy. So burn everything down to the ground. How do we get back up and running in as quick as possible. So figure out what the steps you need to take to get there, and those would be those issues that you need to identify and fix. So, from everything going down to back up, that's all part of your workflow. So find out each piece, find out what doesn't work, and then address it, and then just do that over and over again. The other idea would be files only, no config. So let's say you do get a backup, and all right, it's just a bunch of files, but you went in and had a lot of PHP settings that were unique to this site. There were passwords that were in your code, but they don't work on that server because the database passwords are different. So all these little things that kind of trip you up from deploying faster and recovering faster. So this idea would be, what I would apply is the 12-factor app principles. So if you're not familiar with the 12-factor app, it's 12factorapp.net. And I would check it out. This idea, number 3 in particular, is apps sometimes store config as constraints or constants in the code. This is a violation of the 12-factor app, which requires a strict separation of config from code. Config varies sustainably across deploys. Code does not. So this idea would be, a simple one would be passwords. So every application requires a password to a database or some form. But all those passwords are not the same. So don't store the password in your code. Store it in a place where your code can access it, but that piece of that function that is your password is just vanilla. It can apply to any environment. Let's say you have no SLA or no service level agreement. Define who's responsible for what and make it broad and narrow. So if there's specific things that your company doesn't do, define them and talk to them with your clients or your customers. So that way, if you do run into a situation where you need to fall back on that disaster plan, it's in black and white. And this doesn't have to be complicated. It could just be guidelines. And it also rolls into FAQs. So oftentimes you might get questions over the course of building a product or running your site. Just keep a place where you can note these and then bring them back to your team and develop them over time so that when something does happen, you kind of have a place to go and reference. So another idea would be hosting. So hosting doesn't always fit into your workflow. You can find a host that's the right fit, and I would recommend just seeing what you need to get out of your products and applications and find out if that's the right fit for you. So a couple issues with that would be, let's say you get hammered with bot traffic, or you don't get secure connections, or you want to recover faster, scale, or scale with automation. So let's say you need any one of these, or if you have one of these issues, how would you resolve those using this idea of workflow, anti-patterns, and design patterns? So bot traffic, let's say you get a ton of bot traffic, and you're running a WordPress site, and you just throw a plugin. It's like, all right, my plugin fixed it. It's great. But your plugin is getting hit up with 404s constantly because those bots don't know where they're going, and you're putting that load and burden on WordPress. So the solution would be, all right, let's see if you can put your server to work. It's not like you can block all that traffic, or you can filter it out with an IP. But what you can do is serve 404 pages, or those error pages, that are static on the server. So the server is handling the work either way, but take that burden off of WordPress. So you can get more performance out of your application without being affected by things that you can't control. So secure connections. If you have the ability to do this with some of your hosts, limit IPs or ports. If there's things that you don't need open or you don't want to share or don't use, then close them. Also, if you have the option to use SFTP or SSH, use that. There's no real reason why you shouldn't use FTP if you have the option to use SFTP. And a lot of providers are offering HTTPS for free, so opt in to take that if it's available. So a lot of times I'll ask customers, do you need HTTPS? And I often, after I ask that, I realize, oh, of course, everyone needs HTTPS. But a lot of times the response is, oh, I only collect emails on my site, or I only have a contact form. If you value those emails for your customers, then you'll protect them with HTTPS. Another idea would be recovery, scaling, and automation. So does your host provide this? Do you need this, and does your host provide it? So if they don't, then ask them. Maybe they do offer it in some form, or maybe they can offer a suggestion. So again, config as code. If you can keep your config in a place where it can travel with you, so you can recover faster, then look into that. So, or go Jamstack or serverless. So this idea of scaling, especially with WordPress, is WordPress can scale. We know that. It's not a surprise. But how you get there might be difficult. So this Jamstack idea is JavaScript, APIs, and markup. So using third-party microservices like Discuss for contact forms, you can handle large volume of content, comments, and entries without having to put that burden of your server processing PHP because it uses JavaScript. So these ideas are just like kind of breaking these services up to make them more secure. So if one fails, it's not like a monolith and it all goes down. It's only that one piece. The idea that's also getting more popular is, and if you talk to me at the sponsor booth, is to go serverless. So this idea is different than a CDN or a cache. There's been some comparisons to that, but WordPress to static is an idea that me and my team were working on because a lot of times content on WordPress sites isn't dynamic. You don't need PHP there to run. You just need static HTML. Why put WordPress on a server that runs PHP when there's really no need for it on the front end? You're not processing forms with PHP. Let's say you're not doing dynamic queries with PHP. It's just pretty much static for the most part. So this idea allows you to do certain things like scale vertically and horizontally, but for really, really cheap. So let's say you have a server in Virginia and you get tons of traffic in Australia. So typically, if you're on a scaling environment, a server will spin up in Australia, and now you're paying for 2 servers. But what you can do is put that on a CDN that has edge locations. So if you get traffic in Australia, but most of your traffic comes from Virginia, it's there when it's ready. So it's not like it needs to spin up and scale. It's just everywhere. This is the product that I was working on, Shifter. So Shifter does this. It's a WordPress to static site generator, and it's entirely serverless. So this idea, compared to a regular CDN, is WordPress is inherently not secure because you can view the WordPress admin page. So plugins help with that to sometimes hide it. But it's like a magic trick. It's just kind of putting it behind a smoke screen. You can still find it, but it's maybe limited by an IP, which is also backed by WordPress plugins. So you're putting a lot of weight and priority on something that might fail. Let's say all of your plugins are disabled. All right, now that thing you really depended on of not having the WordPress admin visible is now visible again, and you can hack it. So if you place WordPress in a container that powers up and down, what Shifter does, then you can keep it from ever being accessed from anyone who doesn't need it. So the idea of WordPress plugins, for me, is a little bit of like a love-hate relationship because of that they can fail. People put a lot of trust and weight into them, but they're not a cure-all. So we definitely still need them. They still have a purpose, but they're not going to do everything for you. So what I suggest is to actually learn what they do and figure out, can I do that with my application, and can I write that myself? So if you can write those filters, serve those 404 pages, do the WP admin filtering, then do that. But don't rely on a plugin for it if you don't have to. But there are great plugins out there that you can go and get, or services. So like, for example, I was learning about SiteLock this week, and I didn't know too much about it or those services, but like malware scanning, all those other extra features, like you don't want to do that yourself. You want to use those third-party services, but just learn what they actually do and see if you can apply some of that into your applications. And this other idea is tinfoil hat permissions. So a buddy of mine always describes this as the 777 guy on Stack Overflow. So he is not your friend. So if you're curious about what your application needs to run securely and well, then read the docs. Don't go to Stack Overflow as always like a first option. You often find what you need in WordPress.org, or you can find it in whatever application that you're running. By all means, Stack Overflow is great. Most of my answers come from there. So, but just watch out for that guy. Hashing in MD5. So this is also another thing that I think flies under the radar a bit. So WordPress uses MD5 by default. And if you don't know what hashing is, it's what takes your password or your unique special character that you're plugging into WordPress, and it stores it in the database, but it stores it in a way that's encrypted. So MD5 is a really light encryption, and it can be decrypted fairly easily. So one thing that you can do is you can swap that out with some alternatives. So some alternatives to MD5 would be bcrypt, scrypt, or SHA-256. So what you can do is add a function to your WordPress site, or even like a function that you can find on the WordPress plugin directory, and it will swap that MD5 hashing out with something that's more secure. So if the worst happens and you do have a data breach and you lose some of your database to someone who shouldn't have it, they can't go in and reverse engineer those passwords or unique content. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And with time to spare, too, I see a question in the back. I'll come around with the mic.
Okay. I got that off WordPress.org just a few weeks ago, but you can use it, but I think it's MD5 by default. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to double check that. Any other questions? Yeah. We could shout. I think we need the mic for the video. So if you could just hang on. Yeah. Old batteries.
Sorry about that delay. Who is next?
Do you have a question here?
Over there? Okay, right there.
So in your experience working with clients managing sites and security, when someone has a security breach, when something happens, how have you practically, or can you give us an example of how you've used your pattern process to respond to breach?
So a quick personal story. So there was a client that we were working with at an agency I was at. And it's pretty high profile, and there were some obvious errors and things that were not secure that happened throughout the process of moving this website that we developed to a hosting environment. And what we did was the idea of lobby for the right fix, but compromise. So we documented everything over email. So you just have to be very thorough and make sure that what you're saying and what you need is well documented, because you might need to fall back on that. And that's the idea of an SLA. So if you document that and kind of have an agreement with the client saying, all right, we can't have the perfect hosting environment that we want. This is the versions that we're stuck with. This is the guy that's going to maintain it. Then that's fine, but you just have to put that in writing. So what ultimately happened was the site got defaced by an ISIS hacking group. And this is like for an Ivy League university. So of course it's a bad situation and you don't want to get that phone call in the morning. Especially you don't want to be the one that figures out that the website was defaced before anyone else realizes it. Because then you're just like, all right, am I going to get a phone call in 5 minutes, or do I have time to fix this? So what we did was we just used it as like a I told you so, which was terrible. But but we had the backing to go on. So it was just, you know, like we were trying to do the right thing, and we weren't aggressive about it, I guess, enough. But when it came down to it, we had that kind of safety net of like, told you so. So, any other questions? Yep.
So say you have 10 hours of budget left on a project, right?
Sure.
And you have a list of things that you could go back and fix or refactor or whatever, but they would take 30 hours to do. How do you and you can't get any more budget out of the client because that happens a lot. So how do you determine what's top priority, how quick fix just to get it working, or go back and refactor? What's your flow?
Well, if you were to fix that like a design problem and not a technical problem, so the technical problem would be, all right, I need to go and fix all those 20 things. It's going to take me 30 hours to do, but I only have 10. So what you could do is kind of take a step back from that and see how far you can step back and apply a fix that covers all of them, and then just, I don't know, gracefully tell your client that you need more money. But sometimes you're not always going to have that opportunity, but just find something that works for all of it and covers you. Don't sweep it under the rug, though.
Without naming that university, I'd be interested in the anecdote of, like, what is it that you requested of them to do, and what did they choose to do that allowed them to get hacked? So
this site was really big, and not just big in like scale of the number of pages. It was also big in file size. So they had a large population in China that would visit this school, which was interesting when I was watching the talk yesterday about censorship. And we actually ran into that problem of, all right, we need to show videos on this site, but we can't use YouTube because YouTube's blocked in China. So what we did was we built a solution that would self-host the video, because that was a way that would work for all countries. And it's not the most ideal solution, but it was a solution. And because of that, the file size of this archive, the site, was huge. And the only thing that we could get was FTP access, not even SFTP access. So what we would do is we would be uploading files over FTP, and it would take all night. So what we were trying to do was say, hey, we need SSH access, because we want to pull down these files and download them to the server, or sync them with S3, but we don't have those options. So what we ended up doing was just documenting that all along, saying, hey, this is going to take an extra 6 hours of work, which is 6 hours of additional billable time. Are you okay with that? And eventually what happened was we were stuck on a server with a bunch of other people, which is why they couldn't accommodate us. So if they gave us SSH access, we were on a server with every other school in that university, and I can just go and, with one command, delete the whole server. So I understand wanting to be cautious, but because they were so cautious and unwilling to compromise with that, they put us in a place where we were making it work, but not actually keeping it secure. So when it all failed, we had to basically say, like, all right, these are the things that we need. Give us that environment.
So I was curious how the hack actually happened. So they got into FTP?
So the hack happened because the file permissions we could not change. We were sending blind emails to a help desk, and they were not familiar with using WordPress. And I guess they just went on Stack Overflow and found that 777 guy. Because all the file permissions were just like, we would say, hey, this doesn't work, can you change it? And I guess they got frustrated and just did like a sweep of it, and you could just upload files right to the site. Anyone could. So it wasn't a very elaborate hack. Like anyone could have done it by accident. So yeah, so that was how that happened.
Getting a good workout here.
Are there any security issues that you just like immediately solve with an out-of-the-box WordPress install?
Personally, I don't know, like a personal thing that I always like, a fix. What I've been doing recently is, I think someone gave a talk on it. There's this platform called Roots and like Bedrock, and this idea of using environment variables. So keeping your config as code is like this idea. So don't put any passwords or anything in your application. So that's like one easy way to do it. But as far as like a fix that you could always apply, I'm not really sure. I don't have like there's no kryptonite that I have for WordPress.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.